Unelected Prime Minister Boris Johnson and his Conservative Party colleagues have been deliberately stirring controversy lately by referring to a law passed by MPs as the Surrender Act. There could hardly be a more emotive name. Surrender conjures up the memories of the worst things that have happened to countries. It was the thing that Churchill famously said we must never do. But if we look at the Act and what it says, we can see this is a completely misleading name. Johnson is stirring up emotions without any logical basis, and that should make us all very angry. Appealing to emotions based on misleading information is what every bent salesman or crook tries to do. Luckily, we can all look at the Act and see what it says. I worked as a barrister for 16 years, so I'm used to reading legislation, and I'd like to guide you through it. I can't promise this will be as emotive as phrases like Surrender Act, but sometimes there's a choice between what most arouses emotions and what's actually true. I've always found knowing the truth and being able to act on it more exciting in the long run than being lied to. If you sacrifice integrity, you sacrifice everything eventually. The Act's proper name is the European Union Withdrawal No. 2 Act 2019. The number 2 is because there was another Act with the same name passed earlier in 2019. It's normal for acts on the same topic to have the same name and use a number if there's more than one in the same year. It's also commonly called the Benn Act, named after Hilary Benn MP, who had a leading role in bringing it before the House of Commons. It's a short act, a brief introduction, 5 sections and a schedule. You can read the full text yourself on legislation.gov.uk, but let me take you through it. The introductory text says what the overall purpose of the Act is: to make further provision in connection with the period for negotiations for withdrawing from the European Union. Then there's some flowery words that appear in almost all acts to confirm it's been passed by the Commons, the Lords and given royal assent by the Queen. Section 1, subsections 1 and 2 of the Act create duties or obligations on the government. These 2 subsections say that unless one of 2 conditions are met, then the government has to do what Section 1, subsection 4 says it must do. What are these 2 conditions? Well, first, if a government minister informs Parliament that the government has concluded an agreement with the European Union under Article 52 of the Treaty on the European Union, which means an agreement or a deal on leaving the EU, and that gets approved by the House of Commons, then that's the first condition met. If that happens, the Act has no further effect. The second condition, which is an alternative to the first, is that the government proposes leaving with no deal, and that is supported by vote in the House of Commons. Again, if that happens, the Act has no further effect. In both conditions, the House of Lords has to debate the matter. So far, there's clearly no surrender of anything at all. There's simply an empowerment of the UK Parliament to have to approve a deal or no deal before those things go ahead. Boris Johnson can't do it on his own. Subsection 3 says that if neither of those first 2 conditions are met, we have to go to subsection 4 for what to do next. Well, what's that? Well, it's a step to avoid crashing out automatically with no deal against the wishes of Parliament. Subsection 4 says that the Prime Minister must seek to obtain an extension of Brexit period for 3 months. Now, we don't get this automatically. We will only get it if the EU 27 countries agree. Any one of them could veto it because the way the EU is structured gives every member state a lot of power. What would happen in the extension period? The Act doesn't say. It would be up to Parliament or the government to decide what to do. The government could keep negotiating to find a deal. It could seek to crash out with no deal at the end of January, or it could put the decision back to the people in a referendum, or a general election could be held. Parliament could pass a further law affecting which of those options is followed. But that's not provided for in this Act. Section 2 of the Act says that if there's an extension, then by the end of November, the government must report on progress with negotiations. There has to be a vote in Parliament on that report, and if there's a vote to reject it, then there has to be a further report in January. This has the effect of forcing the government to keep Parliament informed of what's going on, and if MPs are informed, then we, the public, are informed. Again, there's nothing here you could call surrender. Section 3 says that if the EU offers an extension for 3 months, the PM must agree to it. That makes sense following what Section 1 says. Section 3 also says what to do if the EU offers a different length of extension. It says that the government should agree to that extension, again avoiding no deal crash out against Parliament's wishes, unless MPs vote to reject the extension of that length. The power rests with MPs, who we've all elected, not with Boris Johnson, who none of us have elected. Ministers claim that Section 3 allows the EU to decide the extension length and how long we stay in the EU for. That is absolutely untrue, as reading Section 3 reveals. It allows the EU to propose an extension length, but it'll be down to MPs whether to vote to agree that or to reject it. Section 4 is a brief technical part of the Act which identifies this is a new law which replaces one part of a previous Act. Section 5 is also a technical part. It says the Act comes into force immediately, applies to the whole UK, and if there's any conflict with a previous Act, Parliament intends this, the newer Act, to be the applicable law. The schedule to the Act sets out the form of letter that should be sent if an extension is requested under this Act. This text is just 3 sentences long and says the UK seeks an extension for 3 months. So, having examined what the Act actually says, we can see there is nothing that amounts to surrender in it. Anyone who refers to a surrender act is simply lying to you. Brexit's been built on an edifice of lies. Lies about money for the NHS, lies that Turkey was going to join the EU. I can tell you, I'm here in the European Parliament, there are no Turkish MEPs here. The act simply curtails Boris Johnson from crashing us out with no deal. On my website, I have a detailed report about the harm no deal would do. We can do better than Brexit. I'm proud to be British, proud to be European, and I'm most proud of having a commitment to the truth. I say let's have a people's vote on Brexit as soon as possible, and I'm sure the British people will vote to end Brexit for good.